That's, I guess that's, it's like, I know, I'm like, I'm inside, I don't need that. No, but you still do, yeah. Yeah, yeah. I mean, the thing, like, I feel like usually I end up with like 15 different like receptions and things, and it just seems like that's not, like there's a reception for the, do it, yeah, whatever you want. I know it's not like cute. It was meant for a podium.
Yeah, all good. Sometimes it can work, and sometimes it's fine.
Yeah, yeah. Here, okay.
Oh, that's true. I got a lot of fun today.
I'm gonna haul that up to the higher flag. It's a longer road. I'll put my wife.
I didn't see that. No,
You got the 90, right? The 90? No. Oh, you have the, right, the 280. It's all on the extreme. You know what?
I go auto because sometimes I like they always over there.
Yeah.
And I'll tweak it later.
Later is better.
I'm not ever in that much of a area here that I can't fix it. Because the problem is I
it makes everything. Yeah.
and I follow in the hallway and I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, that's so.
It was like,
We already have an EV. We have the Honda Cobra. We bought it last fall. We love it. We, you know, in order to go to Indiana, you gotta stop it one more time. But to be fair, now that we figured out we bought the Tesla adapter.
the yellow.
We love it. The size is great. It's super sweet. Ginormous.
What did it do?
And like, it's definitely tell it's wired in the car. We really don't have any problem. I have the house wired up for 220 volts already. So, I mean, I don't know if we can get 2 EVs, to be honest. We love this one. I'm due for a car. We have a 2015 Jeep but I love EV. I love what it does. I just don't think we're
Spray water.
country. Well, because it's like there's so many places you know that it's awesome, where it's like built here, we're one.
Like
You're
exact opposite.
you go west, or you go
Yeah, do not worry about that at all. I don't give a shit about that. So don't stress about that at all. And if you're well, I want to have you, whoever it is. There.
Yeah, I have to get some coming up.
Well, at least it's a decent place to be.
But I'll be, I am going to reach out to Steve. Probably be down there.
Yeah.
August from the updating.
Smart.
Then trying to wrangle him for a dinner or Jim's.
Or, more importantly, wrangle him to hang out with you and have some fun.
Yeah.
So, are luncheons delayed or were they at the same time?
I think they're at the same time.
Makes me wonder if we should get the luncheons early.
Good afternoon. I'm here today with an incredible group of champions, members of Congress, and advocates for reproductive freedom here in the United States of America. Today, we solemnly gather to mark the anniversary of the Dobbs decision, one of the most unconscionable and un-American decisions in the history of the United States of America. Right-wing conservatives have been determined to strip away reproductive freedom from the women of America for decades. And that resulted in the Dobbs decision that occurred 3 years ago today. Right-wing conservatives and extreme MAGA Republicans want to limit the ability of women to make their own reproductive health care decisions, strip away contraception, restrict the ability to travel to receive health care services, and impose government-mandated pregnancies as part of their march toward a nationwide abortion ban. House Democrats are here to fight back with the Women's Health Protection Act and other legislative measures because we believe in a woman's freedom to make her own reproductive health care decisions, period, full stop. It's a decision that should be between a woman, her family, her faith, and her doctors, no one else. No one else. And so it's my honor and privilege to stand here with these champions for reproductive freedom, with our commitment as House Democrats to make clear to the American people that we are not going to step back ever from the effort to strip away reproductive health care freedom from women. We're going to fight back. On behalf of the women of this country, fight back today and tomorrow, this week, next week, this year, next year, until we restore a woman's freedom to make her own reproductive health care decisions all across the land in every single corner of this great country. It's now my honor to yield to one of those champions, my good friend, my classmate, the distinguished whip of the House Democratic Caucus, and a distinguished gentlelady from the great state of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
Good catch.
Yeah.
Good catch.
Like that remix? Catherine Clark.
Thank you so much. And we are so proud to stand with you, Leader Jeffries. And to my colleagues here, we represent the entire House Democratic Caucus in commemorating what is a very painful day for women and girls in our country. Today is a reminder of how much suffering has been inflicted by Donald Trump and his Supreme Court. 3 years ago today, Trump's right-wing Supreme Court eradicated half a century of progress. His judges declared that women's health, our well-being, even our survival, all of it is secondary. What comes first is an ideology of control, absolute control over if, when, and how to start a family. And as we look forward to celebrating the 4th of July and our fundamental freedoms as Americans, it is a painful contrast that young women today in our country have fewer rights than their grandmothers did, that doctors are being threatened with jail time for providing needed care. Patients are being denied life-saving care. 35% of the counties in our country now are maternity care deserts. And in states that have broad abortion bans, that number soars. In Georgia, for example, half of all counties don't have a single obstetrician. And now the GOP is going even further. Despite all the promises on the campaign trail we heard last year, Republicans are still not finished taking away health care from women in this country. Their big, ugly bill will kick 16 million Americans off of health coverage. It will undo state laws that require insurance coverage for abortion care. It will shut down hospitals and clinics around this country, especially in rural communities. It will defund Planned Parenthood, which means it will defund cancer screenings, prenatal care, postpartum care, fertility treatments, and preventative care. And even this week on the House floor, the GOP will put up an appropriations bill that says to our active women in uniform and to our veterans, you cannot travel to get the care you need if it is not afforded to you where you are serving. Republicans are choosing to make life harder, more expensive, and more dangerous for America's 170 million women and girls, all to benefit 900 billionaires. Well, women are fighting back. House Democrats are fighting back. We're fighting to save lives, and we're fighting to uphold the right to control your own body and your own future. We're fighting to enact the Women's Health Protection Act, a common sense bill that restores reproductive freedom under the law, kicks politicians out of doctors' offices, and helps us build an America that is truly worthy of our daughters. And I am pleased to yield the podium to the author of WIPA, Representative Judy Chu.
Hello, I'm Congressmember Judy Chu from California, and today I am reintroducing for the 8th time the Women's Health Protection Act. 2 years after the Supreme Court ripped away the right to bodily autonomy from millions of Americans, I stand before you to say that we cannot have true equality in this country until we have reproductive freedom for all. In these years since the Dobbs decision, we've seen disastrous impacts of abortion bans in states across the country. I will never forget the 9-year-old from Ohio who was raped and forced to go to Indiana for an abortion, and then her doctor was threatened with the loss of her medical license. I will never forget Amanda Zarowski of Texas, who so wanted her baby, but then was facing a miscarriage, and the treatment from the emergency room was denied, and she almost died from sepsis. I will never forget Amber Thurman of Georgia, who did lose her life because the emergency room refused to treat her after she had a rare complication after taking prescribed abortion pills in another state. She was only 28 years old. It is for them and for all women that House Democrats are fighting back with fierce determination. Today, we introduce the Women's Health Protection Act, or WIPA. Our bill would restore the protections of Roe versus Wade for every woman in every zip code of this country. I want to thank House Democratic Leader Jeffries, Whip Clark, and Chair Aguilar for your steadfast support of abortion rights and for making WIPA H.R. 12, meaning that restoring the right to abortion nationwide is one of our House Democrats' top priorities. I also want to thank my stalwart co-leads, Representatives Franco, Presley, and Escobar, for your continued leadership on reproductive freedom in this country. Let me be clear. We are all standing here because every person, no matter their circumstances, no matter how they became pregnant, deserves dignity, safety, and care in seeking an abortion. You should not have more rights if you get pregnant in California than if you get pregnant in Texas. You should not have to wait in a parking lot bleeding until you are sick enough to get care. And most of all, because no one, not the president, not a Supreme Court justice, not your partner, should be able to force you to remain pregnant if you do not wish to be. Our message today is loud and clear. We will keep fighting until we achieve full reproductive freedom and justice in America. And now let me turn this over to the co-chair of the Reproductive Freedom Caucus and a fighter for reproductive freedom for women of all income levels, Representative Ayanna Presley.
Good afternoon. Thank you to my esteemed colleagues and all of our partners in good. Thank you to the movement. This is really a somber day. You know, this attack on bodily autonomy, on health care, was really the first domino to fall, the first attack in this extremist march towards an abortion ban. And what is that really? A nation of forced birth. A nation of forced birth, while Republicans seek to deny Medicaid and health care when 40% of births are covered through Medicaid. A nation of forced birth when there is already a Black maternal morbidity crisis. My grandmother, my father's mother, died in the 1950s giving birth to my father's youngest brother. And in 2025, we still see that Black women are still 3 to 4 times more likely to die in childbirth or post-birthing complications. A nation of forced birth without universal child care or paid leave. An administration that's hostile towards the women of this country and working actively to degrade Head Start. A nation of forced birth. 3 years ago, I was in the bleachers at our daughter's 8th grade graduation, filled with immense pride and hope at this milestone that she had achieved. And while at that graduation, learned in real time that Roe had been struck down. And I was immediately filled with dread and a heaviness, sobered by the fact that my daughter would be going to sleep with fewer rights than she woke up with that morning. In the 3 years since, we have heard horrific testimony in this climate of the criminalization of patients, providers, and prescribers, and their loved ones who have been denied care, denied their dignity, and even robbed of their lives. Reproductive freedom, abortion care, health care. This is an issue of consequence to millions in this country. Many have been directly impacted. Lives have been lost, and more will continue to be. Amber Thurman was a 28-year-old mother and a medical assistant. She sought medical care out of state due to an abortion ban, and when she needed follow-up care, she was turned away. A DNC, a standard medical procedure, was discussed and deferred. Amber died on a hospital gurney, leaving behind her 5-year-old son. Adriana Smith was a 30-year-old mom to a vibrant 6-year-old and nurse at Emory Hospital. She was sent home from the hospital without the care she needed. She woke up gasping for air, arrived at the hospital, and shortly thereafter was declared brain dead. The blood clots the doctors had missed had claimed her life. To be a Black woman in America navigating our healthcare system so often means to have your pain dismissed, delegitimized, denied, to be gaslit by the healthcare system. Not only was Adriana's pain dismissed and her son robbed of his mother, but all of this is because of an extreme abortion ban in Georgia. The hospital stated that they could not take her off of life support. And because she was 9 weeks pregnant when she was declared brain dead, about a month past a missed period, the hospital would not allow Adriana's family to make sensitive end-of-life medical decisions for her, and the hospital made her body an incubator. This week, baby Chance posthumously came into this world by emergency C-section and remains in the NICU. Adriana's family was finally able to lay her to rest and pick up the pieces as they navigate their deep grief. These stories are chilling, and you'll hear many more of them as there are abortion storytellers making their way through our offices in the corridors of Congress this week. These stories are uncomfortable, challenging all of us to sit in the discomfort so that we never grow complacent or wane in this fight. My daughter asked me 3 years ago, "Why do you always say when we fight, we win?" And I told her, because it's true. And I will not be a liar to my kid. There are those who aim to rob families across this country of essential abortion care in their home communities. And they're complicit in this harm. They're using every tool, the courts, executive actions, and legislation from state houses to Congress, and notably through this big, ugly bill as it makes its way through the Senate as we speak. The cruelty is the point. At this point, Republicans can't deny that they're actually in the business of making people across America sicker, poorer, and more vulnerable. Today, Democrats stand before the American people reaffirming our commitment. I'm so grateful for the steadfast commitment of our leadership. We will use every tool we have to fight for your health care. Abortion care is essential health care. From local mutual aid efforts to fighting like hell in the courts and in the halls of Congress, we won't cede anything because lives depend on it, and your families deserve it. No one should come between a family and their medical providers. As I close, 3 years later, today our daughter is in a couple of days turning 17. She reminds us by the hour. And as we're looking at colleges, one key factor that has shaped her decision is her ability to access health care. Shamefully, that is now a part of our calculus. I want my daughter and all of our children to grow up in a world where they are limitless, where they have every right and freedom that we grew up with and more, where they get the health care they need, and where they can survive a pregnancy if they choose to become parents. And that is why I affirm and believe deep in my bones that these harmful bans and this unjust status quo are not an inevitability, and they are not where this story ends. A more just America is possible. We remain strident in our advocacy that everyone receives the care and dignity they deserve. And with that, I will now turn it over to our indefatigable, exuberant warrior in the work of justice, the chair of the Democratic Women's Caucus, Teresa Leger Fernandez.
Thank you, Chairwoman Presley, and to all of my colleagues here tonight. Yes, I am Teresa Leger Fernandez, chair of the Democratic Women's Caucus. Dobbs was the starting shot in a mad rush to restrict women's health care freedoms. And it's heartbreaking because we want women to have freedom. It's heartbreaking because we want women to live. I had an ectopic pregnancy that threatened my life. I was bleeding to death, and I remember painfully the loss of blood, the rush to the hospital, the being on that operating table as the doctors were shouting, "We're going to lose her." Those doctors had to worry about one thing only. Could they save my life? They did not have to worry about whether they would lose their license or whether they would go to jail. Every woman in every zip code must have the right to choose when, where, and if to have children, to have that freedom to both make that decision and if something goes wrong during pregnancy, to know that she can get the health care she needs, whether she lives in New Mexico, where she can, or in Florida, Louisiana, or Texas, right now, where she can. The Women's Health Protection Act would change that calculus to make sure it doesn't matter where you live, because everywhere you live should be a place where you will have the freedom to make that decision and the freedom to live through any medical disaster. Nuevo Mexico is a reproductive health care haven. We welcome women from across the South and Oklahoma and other places that do not offer the reproductive health care rights we do. But right now, I am incredibly concerned about what will happen in New Mexico's rural areas and in rural districts across our country, because Republicans' attack on Planned Parenthood and Medicaid would gut access to women's health care everywhere. Remember, 56% of Planned Parenthood centers are in rural areas, and these are healthcare deserts. You can't proclaim to be pro-life when your policies would risk the lives of women. The bad billionaires bill will kill 52,000 people, including many women who are having complications from pregnancy. The Democratic Women's Caucus stands with women and reproductive freedom and with women's right to both decide and to live without fear. I'm grateful to my Democratic Women's Caucus members, those here, Chu, Presley, Escobar, and Frankel, and to our leadership, because they know how to prioritize health care over politics. Next, I want to recognize one of the sponsors of the Women's Health Protection Act, my hermana, Representative Escobar.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and I want to thank the Democratic Women's Caucus chairwoman. I want to also thank and extend my appreciation to my co-chairs, and I especially want to thank House Democratic leadership. They have been unwavering and unrelenting in prioritizing women's health care. That's the difference between our leadership and their leadership. I also want to take this moment to recognize the millions of American women who have lived through the consequences of Republicans' attacks on women's health care and our access to health care. I live in a state that has not only prohibited abortion, but extremist views have pushed the envelope so much that there are bounties in a state like mine for anyone who helps a woman access reproductive health care. And this is who they are. This is who is right now in control of women's bodies, and they won't stop until they have absolute control. This is a solemn day, Ayanna, as you mentioned. I'll never forget the day that the Dobbs decision leaked. The day that leaked, my office heard from active duty service member women, because I represent an incredible military installation, one of our country's premier military installations. And my office heard from active duty service members, from women who were afraid that because they were stationed in a state that absolutely would prohibit abortion and abortion care, what would happen to them? How would they deal with the consequences of this decision? And then when the Dobbs decision was actually revealed, when it actually was ruled on by the Supreme Court, when it was no longer a leak, when it was no longer what we thought would happen, when it did ultimately, legitimately become the law of the land, I heard a story from someone close to me, and it was the beginning of a number of stories that I've heard since that day. And this woman close to me shared with me her abortion story. Married, had 2 kids already. She and her husband were delighted and excited about their 3rd baby. They planned for this 3rd baby. They had a room for this 3rd baby. They had a name for their 3rd baby. And in her last trimester, she got the news that no woman who is wanting to grow her family ever wants to hear, which is that carrying this baby to full term would not only endanger the child's life, but would ensure that her 2 children would lose their mother. And she had to make the decision, and thankfully she lived somewhere where there was access, although that access was at a clinic where there were protesters frequently protesting in front of that clinic, judging and yelling at the women entering that clinic, judging and yelling at the doctors who worked in that clinic. And she could not even adequately deal with her grief of having to go through a procedure she never imagined she'd have to go through, all at the same time that she was being yelled at, jeered at, taunted by protesters who felt they knew better than she did. And that's who the Republican Party is today. They believe they know more and they know better than women and their doctors. And don't let them fool you. This is not about being pro-life. If they were pro-life, they wouldn't be cutting Medicaid in their reconciliation bill. And for comparison, when we had the opportunity to pass a reconciliation bill, you want to talk about pro-life? Universal pre-K, paid family and medical leave, expanded refundable child tax credit, accessible, high-quality, affordable child care. They voted against all of that. This has nothing to do with children. This has nothing to do with being pro-life. This is about controlling us. And I hope one day they hear the pain and misery they have caused innumerable women across this country, including women they purport to want to protect, like the women who are now infertile because they couldn't access abortion care in a timely manner in a state like mine. So I stand with my sisters on this day. I stand with my great leadership on this day. I stand with the American people who demand and know that we can do better, and we will. We will not stop fighting until we regain the rights that were stripped away from us. And with that, I would like to yield to a great female woman powerhouse leader in our caucus, Madam Whip, Catherine Clark.
Thank you, Veronica. We will open it up to questions, but please, we're going to take on-topic questions first. Yeah.
There's this report that was made by the conservative group Ethics and Public Policy Center that a large number of conservatives and Republican colleagues have, and some of your Republican colleagues have been backing, and that says that mifepristone is dangerous. And now it's being used kind of as a ammunition, I guess, to urge the FDA to review mifepristone. I guess I wanted to get your thoughts on how concerned are you about that report being a catalyst for the FDA to potentially review mifepristone and, add restrictions to abortion pills?
Yeah, they have been attacking science and in particular mifepristone all along. And what we have is a situation where they have said publicly, we're not pursuing a national abortion ban, which is exactly what they do every single day. And this is another step towards that goal. And we've seen it in the big ugly bill moving this week through the Senate. And we are seeing it now come up in the guise of a new report overturning a drug that has worked safely and effectively for decades. So I don't know if anyone else.
So let me say, they would be going against 20 years of practice of mifepristone in our society. The FDA did many, many studies over 20 years ago to ensure the safety of mifepristone. And in fact, it is safer than many other drugs out there. So they are just trying to invent some kind of way to undermine mifepristone so they can have, in fact, their national abortion ban. This is the one means by which women can still have an abortion safely and in the privacy of their home. And they don't like that. So they are doing everything that they can to make it unavailable, including trying to bring back this Comstock law that would prohibit the mailing of contraceptive devices.
Yeah, thank you. Yes.
Thousands of doctors right now are in the states like Florida and Texas where they feel they cannot intervene unless a woman is about to die. What is your message to those doctors right now before any change come about, the ones that are facing this right now? What is your expectation for them and what's your message to them?
Yeah, and it's part of the crisis that we are seeing in the closing of labor and delivery rooms across the country. What we're seeing in OBGYNs choosing not to practice because they are being asked to choose between their patients and possible criminal charges for doing their jobs. And we're seeing a steep decline in medical school applications to go into these fields. So as my colleague was speaking about being pro-life, how can you say you are pro-family when you are undermining the very doctors that ensure that women can safely deliver children? And we understand how difficult it is. It's why we're seeing the lack of obstetric care really soar in states that have abortion bans or very, very tight laws around abortions. And we are creating an impossible situation for women that you are being forced to choose to have a child, then denied the health care to have that child safely. And the cruelty of this, beyond the moral outrage of it, we can't blame doctors for saying this is too hard to practice. We have to show them our support by changing the laws. And as the leader said, returning this decision to women, their families, in consultation with their doctors and their faith. Anyone else?
The answer is the Women's Health Protection Act, and we will keep introducing it until we can get it passed by the House, the Senate, and signed into law.
Michael.
Thank you, Madam Whip. Earlier this month, Southern Baptists voted to call for the reversal of the Supreme Court ruling that legalized same-sex marriage, and they cited the overturning of Roe v. Wade. In the Dobbs decision, Justice Thomas wrote that the court should reverse the error of the previous precedents, same-sex marriage, contraceptions, using the logic that they used to overturn Roe v. Wade and Dobbs. How concerned are you that conservatives, your Republican colleagues, will use Roe v. Wade, Dobbs, to go after other hard-won rights like same-sex marriage, like contraception? What's your message to Americans out there who are concerned that Republicans are after other rights outside of reproductive freedom that you're fighting for today?
Well, I'll say this about my colleagues across the aisle. They don't hesitate to tell us exactly where they're going. And the Dobbs decision was a roadmap. So the real concerns that I have heard over whether it's same-sex marriage protections, the right to be able to have contraception in this country, and the right for IVF and other fertility treatments is very much on the agenda. And, you know, that is why this legislation is so very important. It is an important piece of saying that we are going to reassert that this is a constitutional right. And at the same time that they are attacking mifepristone and other things, while they are stripping away research into cancer, into fertility treatments, into Alzheimer's cures, where does it leave the American family? It leaves them without hope. And again, it is cruelty by design. And the threats that are embedded in the Dobbs decision are as very real and as threatening as the actual removal of abortion rights. Yes.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Many of your Republican colleagues, they argue and say that they are protecting life and they are not attacking women's rights. Can you just provide me a response to that statement they've constantly been making, especially considering the most recent thing that happened with Adriana Smith down in Georgia?
Yeah, they clearly have no idea what it means to be pro-woman in this country. And that if we want healthy families, you start by addressing the affordability crisis. You start by saying, let's work on getting the price of housing down. Let's make sure that you have a good public school that you can attend. Let's make sure that your child and the birth of that child, which 40% of which are covered by Medicaid, are insured. And that birth of that child does not force you into medical bankruptcy. Let's make sure that you are able, if you are a veteran, to access your benefits. And if you've worked your whole life and deserve Social Security and Medicare, that you can get that. Unlike this big ugly bill that is cutting Medicare by $500 billion. So then we start with the dismantling of women's health care and everything from cancer screenings that are given by Planned Parenthood that they know full well 96% of all the services Planned Parenthood offers have nothing to do with abortion, but they are in underserved communities, and they are sometimes that only preventative health care a patient can access. So on their just desire to control women, we are just seeing them dismantle everything that leads not only to success for women, but allows families to get on that first rung of the American dream. And so let's ask the question, when are they going to not only prioritize women and children, when are you going to work for the American people? And when did this become an operation here in Congress that is solely aimed at those who've already achieved great wealth and power and kicking everyone else to the curb?
Well, I think it's absolutely outrageous. That's why I brought up the case of Amanda Thurman. She lost her life because the emergency room would not do a simple procedure that could have saved her life. And she was, in fact, forced to go to another state just to even have the procedure of mifepristone. But actually, you think about all the other women whose lives could easily have been lost, especially in Texas. And I want to tell you that I went to Texas and I met a club of women that should never have been in this club, which is the club of women whose lives were endangered because the emergency room refused to take them when they had a life-threatening miscarriage. And in fact, Amanda Zawalski is one of them, but actually, I'll never forget another woman who said that her fetus was not going to live, and it was endangering her life. She went to the emergency room. She had the same story as Amanda, and she was going to be turned away. She had to call every state with a clinic that was surrounding Texas to get an appointment, finally got one in Colorado, and because she was so sick, she had to be driven for hours to Colorado in order to get her abortion. That is not saving lives. I mean, what we're talking about is we need to save lives, and by threatening her ability to have treatment in the emergency room, then we are actually saving lives.
Thank you for that question. The American people deserve to know the truth, and the truth is Republicans do not have a pro-woman agenda. They have an anti-women's agenda. Republicans are determined to jam their extreme right-wing ideology down the throats of women and the American people. Republicans are determined to enact a nationwide abortion ban that will strip away a woman's freedom to make her own reproductive health care decisions. Republicans are trying to enact the largest cut to Medicaid in American history that will hurt women, hurt children, and hurt their families. Republicans are literally trying to rip food out of the mouths of women, children, and seniors here in America by imposing the largest cut to nutritional assistance in American history. That's not a pro-woman's agenda. It's an anti-women's agenda. That's the truth to the American people. And that's why I'm so thankful for the leadership of Catherine Clark and Judy Chu, and of course Teresa Leger Fernandez, Veronica Escobar, and Ayanna Pressley, and all of the members of the House Democratic Caucus who are standing up for reproductive freedom, standing up for women's health care, standing up for the ability of women to make their own reproductive health care decisions and access the health care that they need for the safety and well-being of themselves, our children throughout America, and our families.
Leader Jeffries, can I just have you react to the breaking news that the classified briefing on Iran has been postponed? I guess the GOP wants certain members of the cabinet there.
We'll have more to say about that later on this afternoon. But the question that the American people are asking is, why are Republicans hiding facts and the truth from America with respect to the possibility that their actions will drive us into another catastrophic war in the Middle East?
Thank you.